Hello everyone and welcome to the second tutorial I am doing for Cuphead. This one is going to be for all bosses simple, glitchless. As you know, I did the first one for regular, and for the beginning part there's not much different. So you're just going to be going through, again I'm going to be showing off the route where you go and grab just spread. So first you're going to go through the tutorial here. Again, pretty much the same thing if you've seen the regular video. You kind of want to just time your dash as well to be able to get the maximum amount of distance while also being in timing with when you need to jump as well as fire. So quickly getting through. Again, you want to pause the same moment you hit the door so that you can exit to map instead of going back through Elder Kettle's house. Then you're going to want to speak to the apple guy so that you can get the 3 free coins from him. And then you're going to want to head over to the shop. Again, since this is glitchless, you are not going to be using the glitch where you press A and B at the same time to buy the weapon and leave, but that is also an option you can do for glitched categories. Then you're going to want to quickly equip the weapon, make sure not to equip it during the dialogue screen, as that is a glitch. Alright, so the first boss we are going to be getting into is the Root Pack, and on Simple, for people that have not done Simple before, it is actually quite a bit different. So the first change you're going to notice is that the shots are a lot slower, as well as only having 3 compared to the 4 that come out during regular. So again, just doing the same strategy, staying up close so you can do the most amount of damage with the spread, and you'll see immediately that instead of fighting Onion, we just go straight to Carrot. So you're going to want to do some 3 EXs. Again, I'm just showing off the path that I use, and now you want to just time your jumps to get close whenever the carrots aren't hitting you. Then you can damage boost because he only does 2 of these attacks. But as you can see there, I got him fast enough. But yeah, a pretty simple boss. And other than just occasionally sometimes forgetting that you have to fight straight to Carrot instead of the Onion, can get you, but with practice you should be fine. Alright, so the next boss we're going to be doing is Ruby and Croaks, and because these boss fights are going to be a little shorter, I am going to be showing the pathing between each boss. So getting into here, again, with the Ruby and Croaks, as you saw with the Root Pack, there's going to be some phases that are cut out, as well as attacks being a lot easier to dodge. So as you see, there are less flies here, as well as the punches being a lot slower, and only 1 round of them going out, and then you want to just get as close as possible. A safety strat is basically just using your EXs here. You can save another one if you want to confirm jumping over the frog when he does his roll, just so you don't fall into them. Now you kind of just want to keep tapping the front movement so you don't run into it. There, I kind of missed how my jump so I got hurt. And yeah, again, a pretty easy boss fight. And since it is on simple difficulty, you do not fight the final phases of any bosses. So yeah, pretty easy. The next boss up in the running is going to be Goopy Legrande. So again, you kind of just want to follow general pathing as well as minimizing your movement to get the best time in the overworld, as that can waste a lot of time. Again here, if you watch the regular video, or the regular tutorial, you kind of just want to mirror his movements as much as possible. It's a lot easier to do it here because he does move a lot slower. Duck under that attack. Here, though, you do have to get 3 bars compared to, like, the 2.5. Because some of these phases are a lot more drawn out. I had to move there just because I was a bit too close. Just dash and get some damage there. And, yeah, if you get it well enough, you can actually kill him before he does that attack, as you've seen there. And you can actually do it a lot faster if you get decent patterns, but I just did it for safety. So, yeah, that was Goopy. Now, on to Hildeberg. Again, you kind of just want to follow general pathing to not waste as much time in the overworld, and you want to minimize your movements as much as possible to just basically do what you need to do. You want to quickly switch out to exit to map instead of going over to the actual exit, as it saves just a small amount of time. And now we get over into Hilda. So with Hilda, again, a lot of the attacks are shorter, less plentiful, like less projectiles on the screen. Slower, as well as you don't have to fight her final phase, as well as EXs being a lot easier, or parries being a lot more plentiful. If you've done Hilda before, like on any other difficulty in general, you will basically know the same strats. You just have to be less risky and things like that. There are plenty of different ways, but as you can see here, I go for a nuke before she goes into her next phase, and if you do it well enough, you can get another card to do a quick EX there. But because this is on simple, you cannot actually damage enough to make it so that she just immediately switches out of her phase, but you can still just make it so that she has a very short phase there. Again, basically just wanting to minimize damage. I went for a risky nuke there, but I still got it. Otherwise, you can just get shot there. But, yeah. Pretty much just learning the same strats. The strats don't change much between regular and simple. Alright, so now for the last boss of World 1. We're going to be making our way down to Cagney, trying to minimize our movements as much as possible, clicking into the boss. And with Cagney, it can actually be a bit annoying if you are used to playing on regular, as there are certain tricks or certain things that you do on regular that you don't really have to do on simple. So as you can see here, you do get usually a second one of her stretch attacks, or even a third, as you see right here. But for the most part, you also just want to do the same thing, just stay up close. Here, the shots are more spread out, so that can be a bit weird for you if you're not used to it. So just going to quickly bait them out so that they just attack you when you're lower, and you can still just jump and do damage. Otherwise, you want to just keep doing as much damage as possible. And when it gets into that second seed attack, that means you're just about to kill it, because it will not go into its last phase. So yeah, a pretty simple boss if you don't get screwed over by the RNG. Alrighty, so now we are going to be making our way over to World 2, and this is where you're probably going to start seeing the most resets if you are a new runner to these, to Cuphead and things like that, because this is where it starts to get a lot riskier as far as bosses. So, as you can see, we're just going to quickly click through to get through that cutscene, as well as just talking with King Dice, and we're going to slowly make our way over to Beppy the Clown. So, Beppy, most of his attacks stay pretty roughly the same, though there's some things you still want to keep track of for the most part. But with Beppy, at the start here, you want to dash right into the far corner, and then if you time it just right, you can jump over and not get hurt, and then you just keep shooting his back. Be sure to switch between the weapons when he moves to different spots. And again, if you are not used to simple, you are going to have to be doing this phase a lot longer, as instead of 2 bars, you have to get him down to like 2.5. Or you have to do 2.5 EX bars of damage. Then here, you just gotta keep going. There's no train during this part, so you kind of just sit freely and just have to dodge the dogs, really. There, I kind of missed up an EX to an extent there, and you kind of want to always end with an EX, because that way some of the damage carries over. I damage boosted there to get some damage. Again, no train, so you don't really have to do with much. There, you can do an EX to actually avoid that attack, but you have to time it really well. If you don't, you can just fall into the damage. As you can see here, I'm playing it safe because I did get damaged. Usually you can risk it. And generally, 1 out of 3 of his attacks on the green horse are always going to be a parryable, so keep that in mind. If you see the 2 green ones come out, you can parry the last one. Alright, so next up on the chopping block is going to be Jimmy. So again, we are not going to be picking up the bomb, so we're just going to go straight into this boss fight here. And with Jimmy, there's several different strategies you can use. I'm going to be using one that's more conservative as far as when you use your nuke. Sometimes people will go for like trying to get 2 parryables in the first phase to then nuke, but I saved mine until the next phase. I took a damage there, but I led it into the corner, and you want to use your EX so that you can save it, otherwise you will end up just getting it. You don't have to always do that, and sometimes if you do enough damage, you can race it and deal a nuke in that first phase. Otherwise, for the second phase, there's no saws or anything like that, so you just kind of fly through. You can shoot all the phases you want to deal some damage, as well as get any remaining EX you need to do a nuke. But other than that, just taking care to make sure to fly through. If you are worried, you can use the mini mode to make sure you don't get hurt. But otherwise, just going to want to do that. I nuke at the start here to clear out some of the ghosts, as well as use some invincibility frames. If you are close enough on that attack that he does, you will actually not get hit by it, as it forms around you instead of on top of you. So that's something you can do, but the ghost can sometimes still hit you, so you have to be worried about that. And then with here, the hat on this part won't actually fire out all the pellets, it will just follow you, but if you lead it away, when it's just about to start the an attack animation, it'll just get stuck when the puppet is about to do attack animation. Then here, you're basically already almost done, so then you can kind of just sit and do it, and just it does, yeah. Yeah, that is Jimmy the Great. Again, nothing much really changes other than some attacks being simpler. Alrighty, Baroness. Baroness is probably one of the bosses that kind of gets harder if you're used to her on a regular difficulty, just due to her final phase being a lot different. If anything, I would say more difficult. But for the most part, some of her bosses are pretty simple, though you will notice that a big difference is for the Gumball Machine here, he doesn't actually stop and do his attack, he actually just runs across the stage. So you really have to be mindful about where you're going to be dashing as far as to reach that platform in the middle. Okay, so again here with the Waffle, he doesn't actually do his spread attack, he kind of also just flies around the screen. Another thing to note is that the Cupcake is also not in the rotation for the bosses. And so here, I kind of messed up, and I dashed forward, but I still went for a, if you take damage there, you can just go for a damage boost, and then just keep damaging him. And then you'll see here, for her final phase, instead of going into her castle, she actually just fires shots at you with her shotgun. And the strategy is basically just baiting out her shots into bad spots, and then EXing her when she's in her downtime. And yeah, it can be annoying, and I do recommend a lot of practice on her, so you know what to do for every single one of her bosses. And yeah, that is Baroness. Wally Warbles is probably one of the easier bosses when you compare it to their regular counterpart, as the final phase is probably one of the bits where people reset the most if they're unlucky with RNG, but for the most part, it's pretty simple here. So, you want to stick clear of the back wall as much as possible. As you can see, the eggs actually just travel up along the sides of the back wall, so you only have to dodge it when it's fired at you, and then just make sure you're not sticking onto that back wall. I mistimed where my placement was, and I kind of just got hit right there. You can go for an early nuke there to start building up some more, but I kind of just want to do actual just straight damage. And then do a nuke into its second phase, because this one can be pretty long if you get some bad placement. As well as the bursts of feathers being a lot shorter, instead of them being long drawn-out ones. And so then the final phase for this boss, since we are cutting out the original final phase, is going to be the child. So the eggs also don't come in, so you can just sit there. And if you are decent with parrying, you could have hit that before getting hit. I messed up there, so I couldn't use the on-contact explosion, but I still did fairly well. So practicing that timing for the parries on the small child is probably an important thing to do. Alrighty, so Grim Matchstick is next, and if you haven't seen the regular video, you use this shortcut to get around to actually getting to Grim Matchstick instead of clearing out all the other levels to make space to make it over here. You just use that shortcut, and now you are at the boss. Grim Matchstick is probably one of the bosses that gets easier, or a lot easier in simple, as their final phase can be quite annoying and much of a damage sink. The clouds also move a lot slower. Otherwise, it still works kind of the same. You kind of just want to do enough damage to bait out its tail into a bad spot, and then you can kind of just do more damage. The attacks are incredibly simple, and really the only times you'll get damage is either you just ran out of space off the platforms, or you honestly just weren't paying attention. And then here you kind of just want to start just soaking damage in, and making sure that you don't run into people. You see I kind of messed up there and I dropped down too fast, but I still got him fairly quick, and I probably could have just sat in him, in his model, and just done damage. But yeah, a fairly simple boss, and really, spatial awareness will get you far with him. Alright, now it's time for Rumor Honeybottom, the first boss of World 3. So again, we're going to be making our way to the Die House here, quickly going through, and just dashing over to King Dice, spamming through his dialogue, dashing one more time to get to the door, and then we're going to be skipping through the cutscene here. Now, during this cutscene, you can start moving a bit, so you want to point down to the right while moving, and you'll actually get a bit of a head start out of that black screen. But otherwise, it doesn't save that much time, so don't worry too much about it. Now, this first phase, the guard actually... The guard takes a bit less damage for him to finally get switch, as well as the platforms going slower. But there are, in fact, more projectiles in the explosive device that he drops, but they are a lot slower, so it's kind of a trade-off between regular and simple. Also, platforms are entirely around the screen instead of it being only in select places, as well as them being slower, and attacks only have one projectile instead of the two that she spawns. And so here you'll see, yeah, I still got hit by it because I accidentally jumped in the wrong spot. And she will always end with this attack where she puts her head down in the middle. And this is basically just, you want to just damage up as much as possible. And yeah, a relatively simple boss where if you understand her attacks, it's really not that much you have to worry about unless you just take a bunch of damage from mistiming jumps. Alrighty, now time for most people's most hated boss on their casual playthroughs. We're just going to make our way up to Dr. Cal's spot. So here's kind of annoying because of the weird hitbox for his little shack there. You kind of just want to hit A until you find a spot, and then you want to just click in. So there's an order to these things that you want to destroy. You want to destroy this top one as fast as possible. And then it is gone. There you go. You want to just drop down. I missed that first parry, which was kind of annoying. And then you want to do a bit of damage to the core, and then get rid of those two little flyers as fast as possible, as they can be annoying. I took a hit there because I was spacing out. Do a bit more damage to the core. Clear those guys, finish off the bottom, go back up. I took another hit there by spacing out. Clear out the nuke, get rid of that, and then you just kind of want to damage as much as possible. I was waiting for the nuke to come out. That way, when I go and use my nuke, I will just straight up damage through it and use my invincibility frames. And yeah, you don't actually have to go into any other phase. You only have to get him out of that first one, and you're done with the boss, so a lot of time saved there. And as far as the switch between simple and regular. Alrighty, so here I'm going to be showing off the shortcut that you would use if you were going to do this category in simple percent. So here you go. You would actually just avoid the entire boss with Dr. Cal, and just avoid his little, like, locked garage, and then you would go to Sally Stage Play, which is the next boss we will be fighting. And like I said, now we are at Sally Stage Play. And again, it is similar to her regular version. You really just want to mirror her movements as much as possible. And jump there to get some more damage as she's going back up. Trace her through the air to shoot her. Avoid. You also want to place yourself in more favorable spots. And if you're lucky, you'll get an attack as she is doing her quote-unquote like final animation. You'll get a long attack so you can do more damage. Now, if you set yourself up on the opposite side of the stage, she will always spawn across from you. So that is important to note, so that you're not surprised where she is. Completely jump over the rats. The rats are a lot slower, and only 2 of them spawn this time, as well as she does more attacks to draw herself out of weird spots. And you can actually fire EXs off screen here a lot earlier, or kind of a bit earlier, to get some damage. And since we saved all of our health, we can just straight up damage boost through the wave and get a pretty quick kill. So yeah, that is Sally Stage Play. Not a difficult boss, but can be annoying if you just lose your spacing. Alright, now it's time for Werner Werman, so we're just going to slowly make our way down. Again, trying to minimize the movements as much as possible to avoid any time loss, and then we're going to go in. So his attacks are pretty simple. He also doesn't move his cart as fast or as wide, as well as the attacks being slower with less projectiles, as you can see. I still get hit there because I just mistimed my jump and didn't go for a parry and I just ran into a screw. The attacks are a lot slower and much simpler, so that you can basically just dash and avoid them midair. When he does that, like, pink launchpad attack, I tend to just fire all my EXs that I can, that I have on hand. I got hurt there just because I, like, moved midair on top of the can again. Just annoying. Now, his phase in simple is actually a lot harder, in my opinion, than his phase in regular, because he moves across the screen the entire time. The saws do not activate, but honestly, they weren't that much of an issue in regular. And so you kind of just want to keep tracing him as well as keeping track of where he is. And then quickly finishing him off. And then you're done. So his final phase is really the biggest issue, but with enough practice you can get it down pretty simply. Alrighty, now it is time for everyone's favorite sea captain. We are making our way over to Captain Brinybeard. Now, Brinybeard, the thing that makes him a lot simpler is that his attacks are now more spaced out instead of them kind of overlapping each other, as well as the barrel being a lot slower in this case. So again, you kind of just want to do the same thing you would do on regular, which is basically just take the spread and just fire as close as possible. Here I kind of move away for safety to get an EX off that triggers him to do another attack, but I got hurt, let me back away to do it again. get that parry midair to do another EX, and then quickly go back to hitting him. I got unlucky here, and I got the dogs, but because it is simple, the dogs only spawn the one time instead of being spread out. The squid is as useless as ever and doesn't really do any attacks that are worth mentioning. You want to bait out the barrel as much as possible so that it goes away from you, and I got a knockoff. I got a knockout pretty quickly there, other than a couple bits of bad RNG. But yeah, a fairly simple boss that if you get the parry timings for his squid gun are relatively simple. Alright, so now we're going to make our way up to Cala Maria, the second to last boss in Simple, as I will explain later as to why that is that fact. And again, with Cala Maria, you basically just want to keep doing as much DPS on her as possible throughout all of her attacks. Just doing some damage, and hoping to get the attacks that give you parryables. Most of her sea pets are a lot easier to manage, other than Seahorse that is still an annoying asshole. And here you want to basically get as many parries as possible throughout these attacks. I got unlucky and I got both at the same time, so I couldn't space out getting more parries. And then once you find yourself an opening, you want to just go for a nuke to quickly damage through all the phases. Seahorse comes in. Seahorse, the only difference between simple and regular is he does not push you as much as usually on regular you would just get knocked up to the top of the screen, basically. And again, you want to listen to that audio cue that'll be coming up in a moment. And you see, right as I hear the audio cue, I move up to the top of the screen. Just want to deal as much damage as possible, and if you have a nuke, it's best to use it there to quickly clear out as many of the EOs as possible. Otherwise, you just want to fire some missile EXs to clear them out as well as do damage. So yeah, health management as well as parry management is probably your best bet for practice with this boss. Alright, now we're going to be making our way to the final boss of any simple route you're going to be doing in this game, Phantom Express. So with Phantom Express, most people probably know that this first phase has the bouncing eyeballs, and really you kind of just want to keep consistently shooting and occasionally jumping up to deal with the eyeballs. If you miss any of them, all you really have to do is just move and readjust yourself, or even just switch to the spread to quickly deal with them. But for the most part, they're moving so slow that you can actually shoot them. And here, I'm actually showing it again because there's another technique you can use if you buy the spread. You can actually get really close here. And as long as you don't put your your back foot any further than that last wheel, you won't actually get hit. You won't actually get hit because of the bullet spacing here. So now we are up to here, and you will notice that there are no ghosts. I jumped up because if you actually time your short hops well, you can actually do more damage, but it's very iffy sometimes, and sometimes you can actually just die. But yeah, like I was saying, there are no ghosts that actually spawn, but if you do it relatively well enough, you can still just get them really fast due to the lower health bars. And then here, you again just want to use the same strategy that you would use for regular, which is basically just timing your jumps and jumping up to do an EX. I didn't have any more EXs there, so it was kind of annoying. And you kind of just want to P-shooter and trace him. You see I quickly grab a little EX there, so I can finally kill him off. And yeah, and because this is because this is simple, you don't go fighting the final phase, which makes it a lot easier to deal with that boss. Now, the special thing about simple percent categories is that the route ends the moment you get into Hell and you get to the cutscene with King Dice. You can't actually get into Hell because there is no die house for him to tell you off because he's actually at the casino. So this would be where the run ends specifically at this point. So thank you everyone so much for watching. I hope you guys use the tips that I point out in this tutorial. I hope everyone goes out and practices as well as gets some new runs on the board. If you have any need for any extra information, there's going to be links in the description for helpful stuff. And yeah, good luck to everyone watching.